So let's talk a little bit about decorators. What are some real world examples where, besides utilizing them in property setters and getters, for example, like what are some other examples of how people can utilize decorators?
The primary motivation for a developer is to add debugging to your code, and there it is the most. It is one of the largest uses of a decorator. But decorators are able to add functionality to your code. So we could basically do a lot of stuff. Like for example, if I want to see how much time my code has taken, then I can basically run the timer before starting the code, and then after the function has run, I can say okay how much time it has taken. So for example, welcome to this explainer video for Python class decorators. So for example, I have a function here which just prints my name, right? So it's, if I tell it to just print my name, and so what it would do is, if I say print my name is Jack, so if I print my name, so what it would do is it would basically just run and it would print the name Jack, right? And in that case, the name Jack is printed. Now, what if I want to see whether this function is run or not? So what I would generally do is I would write here, now entering the function print name, and when I'm getting out of it, I would say that getting out of it. Now, right now it looks very simple because you are entering the function and you're printing the name and you're getting out of it. Imagine this to be part of a huge code base where you are just calling this function print name. So that was a problem. What we could do is we could uh, use another function, and we say okay, let's call a function, let's call it debug, right? So primarily this is debugging information, and we send it a function. And now when I send this function, we could have another function within the function which I would call for is insider function, right? So insider function, what it does is whenever you call this function, the insider function is also called. I would call the function here, and then I would also pass the arguments of the function, so that whatever arguments I pass, they are also passed to the function that is calling the debug function. Okay, and so if I add the decorator here, I would say debug. In that case, if I simply call the function, what happens is that it also calls the decorator function, which primarily takes the input name here, and then it basically calls the function with the name argument. Now if I want to have a general arguments, for example, if I don't want to send only one argument, I want to send any number of arguments, what I would do is I would add arguments here, and then if I call the function, it would basically print Jack. Now if there are two arguments like last name and as well as first name, so we can say that first name and last name. So now if I say Jack, Jack Collins, so now what we expect is it would be basically printing Jack and Colin. So this is a decorator. It's basically what it done is it has taken out the uh, it has we are able to execute the function, but we are also able to add functionality to the function using the decorator. Now this was the basic enhancement to, and it is a clean way of doing the same thing that we were doing. And now if I want to add another function, and for example, if I have another function which is basically, I would say that calculate the age of a person. Okay, so if I give the age, and what it would do is it can say that print the age. So it would basically Now I can even add the same decorator to this calculate age, and I say that okay, let's call the function calculate age, and I say 10. So if I run this function, I would get the sorry, let's get rid of this. And now if we run this, so you see we are entering the function here, and we are printing the age, and we are exiting the function as well. So we can use this at multiple places without changing the functionality of the function. Generally, in object-oriented programming, whenever we have a class, we have different objects in it and different members of it. So for example, we'll look at an example. For example, if we are looking at a drone, so if there's a class of drones, so if we are familiar with drones, the drones normally have different number of wings. So there would be 2 wings, 4 or 8 or whatever. So now here, what we do is we say that we have a drone, and it has got a first we initialize it by a number, and we say that we would give it the number of wings, right? So the number of wings of a drone would be basically a member of the class. So we say that self dot wings, they are equal to the number of wings. Now the number of wings are stored as a private variable, so we don't have access to this variable. So what decorators of class do is that they help us give access to the private variables by using different functions which are wrapped around it. So now if you look at, for example, there is a property decorator, which is a built-in decorator. So if I say that I have a property decorator and I give it a function, let's suppose wings, right? So what it does is simply it can return me the self dot wings. Okay. So it would simply return me the wings. Now if I use this class and I say okay, so my drone is equal to drone, and I have to give it the number of wings. For example, I give 4. Okay. So if I run this, if I run this, what happens is it would simply declare a class that is drone. Now if I say okay, print my drone dot wings. Okay, so let's see what happens. So it has told me that there are 4 wings. So now without I am able to get access to the private variable wings of the class, private member wings of the class, and I have been able to use a function that is wings, and I've declared it as a property. Now this simply declaring a property, that basically if you look at it, it primarily gives you different attributes. For example, it says if you have in VS Code, you have got this opportunity to basically look at the documentation. So there are different options here. You can see that it can give you a getter, setter, and a delete. So you can basically declare different setter property, which is the getter, setter, and the deleter. So now if I want to change the number of drones, so I would need a setter function for this variables, but this is a private variable. So instead of having to make it a public variable, when we declare the setter function, we write wings.setter. So now right now the number of wings were 4, and then if again I print my drones dot wings, so now if you see, they would be changed to 16. So now the setter function is basically it gives us the ability to change the variable of the members of a class drone by using the setter function. Now property function, this property decorator, it basically adds the getter. Now what happens if I add a wings dot getter? So if I add the getter function and I say return and self dot wings, and I add, let's suppose, wings. So now if I run, what would happen? So it would basically tell me there are 4 wings and 16 wings, right? So it's basically returning me the number of wings.
So I think like in our actual, functions themselves that are being decorated, we don't have to put in, say, like non-functional code like log this, log
Yeah,
these results. We focus very, very specifically just on like application logic to keep things more readable, correct?
yeah,
You showed examples of doing like basic print statements, but in an actual like real world application, those print statements could be replaced by code to actually writing it to a log file, writing it to a database, or
yeah,
utilizing an external logging service, right?
yeah,
One of the nice things here is that especially like during development and debugging, you might include a lot more like diagnostic functionality to log and things like that. But
yeah.
once you're ready to go into production, you can just go into like that decorator function and either comment that out or reduce
Just
or
remove it.
lessen
Yeah,
reduce the
so,
number of like
yeah,
diagnostic calls to make the code more efficient in production. Since we're not putting like this non-functional code within the actual application logic functions. If we had done that, we wanted to change things, we would have to do like a search and replace, and it might affect like dozens of different functions. But if we're capturing this within like the decorator function, we only have to change this in one place, and it makes those changes globally across the entire application, right?
exactly. That is the huge benefit that we get.
Thanks for sharing this knowledge with us.
Thank you very much, and it was a pleasure talking to you.
If you enjoyed this video, help us out by liking and subscribing, and tell us in the comments if you want us to explore any other languages or topics. Come visit us at educative.io, where we have over 600 courses spanning programming languages, web development, data science, and system design and interview prep that provide pre-built dev environments that let you code directly in the browser so you don't have to configure anything. Thanks for listening, and maybe check out one of these videos next. Thanks.